This film is based on a true story. In the opening shots, we see a boy named Paul Potts singing in the church choir. At one point he loses consciousness. It turned out that his eardrum had ruptured. The parents were very worried, but the doctors assured that the boy would be fine. The events take place in Wales, in 1985. For as long as he can remember, Paul has dreamed of singing at the opera. Because he was different, he was constantly bullied by his classmates. The main bully was Matthew. Paul grew up, but nothing in his life changed. The guys continued to bully him, especially Matthew. In spite of this, Paul did not stop to sing in the choir. The teacher was very pleased with his progress.
That's very nice indeed.
The year was 2004. Father Roland thinks his son's dreams of opera are childish, but the mother, on the contrary, supports him in everything. Paul works in an electronics store. His colleague and boss, Braden, talks about how much fun he had with a girl over the weekend. Paul also has a pen pal, but he has never seen her in person. They have been communicating for more than a year, but so far the matter has not gone beyond correspondence. To make things easier for Paul, Braden took his phone and invited Jules to come. Paul is very scared, because he has no experience of relationships with girls. Finally, the day of the meeting came. Paul was very nervous, but Jules turned out to be a very sweet and cheerful girl. Instead of flowers, he gave her a flashlight.
It's a torch.
It's Ace.
A nice conversation ensued between the young people. At one point Paul was noticed by his mother, who was just passing by. This is the first time she has seen her son with a girl. When the woman invited Jules to their home for dinner, she gladly accepted. At dinner, the girl told that she worked as a pharmacist. Paul's parents were delighted with her. Roland said he was unhappy that his son refused to go to work in the steel mill, following his example. There are a lot of opera-related posters in Paul's room. Jules liked it. During the walk, Paul told her that he dreams of an opera career. He is only truly happy when he sings or listens to music. Jules asked Paul to sing for her, but he was very shy. Paul confessed that he dreams of going to the music school in Venice, which is headed by Pavarotti, the most influential figure in the opera industry. But it takes a lot of money to move to Venice. There are still 3 weeks left, and Paul is missing £500. In the evening, Paul and Jules were relaxing at a bar. The girl told him that her ex-boyfriend had cheated on her. The young people almost kissed, but they were interrupted by Braden, who really wanted to meet Paul's girlfriend. Also, Braden advised him to sign up for a talent contest, because the prize is £300. Jules realized that she was late for her train. She thanked Paul for a wonderful day and told him to make sure he participated in the talent contest. Before she boarded the train, Jules kissed Paul. He was over the moon. It was time for the talent contest. The audience mocked Braden, who performed unfunny jokes in front of them. It was time for Paul to take the stage. He was so nervous that he changed his mind about entering, but Braden made him do it. At first the audience laughed at him, but when they heard him sing, they were mesmerized. The laughter changed to rapturous applause. And only Matthew was furious. When Paul and his friends were returning home, Matthew and his bullies attacked them to take the money. Paul fought back, however. Braden Hydrangea's girlfriend knocked Matthew out. Her rocker friends also came to their aid. Paul offered Matthew peace, but he refused. Regardless, Paul was happy, because he will go to Venice. Jules was angry with him, because he hadn't called her in 3 weeks. But when she learned that Paul was calling her from Venice, her anger was replaced by joy. The School of Music was in a building built in the 16th century. Every day students study Italian, and during the day they devote most of their time to opera. Sometimes they even have stage combat lessons. Every day Paul chatted on the phone with Jules, who supported him in everything. One day Signora Fiorentino told the students the wonderful news: in 2 weeks Maestro Pavarotti will visit the school to give a master class. Unfortunately, the maestro will not have time for everyone, so the best students will be chosen to perform solos for him. Paul was among them, as was Alessandra. She asked to sing a duet with Paul in order to pre-selection. Long rehearsals began. Signora Fiorentino gave instructions. Alessandra and Paul need to convince the audience that they are in love. After the rehearsal, the girl invited Paul to dinner with her family. He agreed. First she showed him around the city. Alessandra's grandmother really liked Paul. Her family members turned out to be very nice people. From that day on, Paul and Alessandra rehearsed everywhere. When the day of the performance came, the entire audience was great delight. After the concert, Alessandra in a fit of joy kissed Paul. At first he responded to the kiss, but then he said that his girlfriend was waiting for him at home. Alessandra wished him good luck for tomorrow's performance. Paul told Jules that tomorrow he would be singing for Maestro Pavarotti. Paul's only regret is that Jules is not with him. The most important day of his life had arrived. Alessandra performed perfectly, and the maestro was very pleased. Now it was Paul's turn. He was so nervous that he started acting stupid. In addition, he could not hit the notes. Paul tried again, but again nothing worked. Pavarotti asked him to stop because he noticed that Paul lacked confidence. To sing opera, he needs to steal the heart of the audience. Unfortunately, the maestro did not see charisma in him. Paul could not hold back tears, for his dream was shattered. He returned to Wales and got a job in a steel mill, just like his father wanted. Being depressed, Paul didn't notice anyone or anything around him. He also ignored Jules' calls and messages because he was ashamed. Paul left his shift early. His father told his son that he had to stop living in dreams. Now real life began for him, where money was earned by hard physical labor. Soon Paul visited Braddon and talked about the disappointment that had befallen him. He embarrassed himself in front of his main idol. Braddon doesn't think that's a reason to give up on his dreams, because all people make mistakes. Paul finally decided to call Jules, but now she wouldn't pick up the phone because she was resentful of him. However, Paul did not give up and drove to her town, and then found the pharmacy where she works. Jules was unwilling to listen to him, but he was very insistent. However, Jules still was not ready to forgive him. When she was coming home from work, Paul, who had been waiting for her the whole time, tried to explain himself. Jules was adamant, but suddenly Paul was singing. Fascinated by his singing, Jules decided to forgive him after all. Soon the young people were married. In honor of his wife, Paul sang an excerpt from an opera. After the wedding, all the guests had fun. Paul's mood was dampened only by the fact that his father invited Matthew to the wedding, since they are distant relatives. The leader of the church choir told Paul that his vocal skills had greatly improved. He invited him to perform in the local opera. Although no money was paid for it, Paul gladly accepted. Soon Jules and Paul left the guests. The wife gave him a special gift, a gramophone and original recordings of his favorite opera singer. The newlyweds listened to Paul's favorite aria about love. Both are very happy to have each other. Soon rehearsals began. Paul performs the lead role. At the same time, he and Jules moved into a new house. In the evenings they were constantly walking together. Paul went back to work at the electronics store. One day a drunken Braddon came in and said that Hydrangea had left him. He asked her to marry him, but she refused. Braddon suggested that Paul get drunk. He didn't really want to, but decided to support his friend. When Jules returned from work that evening, she saw Paul on the floor in pain. He was immediately taken to the hospital. It turned out that his appendix was inflamed. Paul can't afford to miss tomorrow night's premiere, but the doctor said that if Paul were to perform, it could cause irreparable damage to his health. In spite of this, Paul did not refuse to perform. Being backstage, he felt very bad. The first act was terrific, but it was time for the final act on stage. Just as the doctor anticipated, Paul began to feel sick. He lost consciousness. He was rushed to the operating room. Later, the doctor told the terrible news. They found a tumor on his thyroid. It meant that he would probably not be able to sing anymore. Jules has always been there for her husband. She said that she did not care whether he can sing or not, because she loves him no matter what. When Paul recovered, the wife brought him home. There was a surprise waiting for him. All his family and friends threw a party to celebrate his return. After the surgery, Paul can't talk yet, but he wrote on the paper that he loves them all very much. At home, Paul listened to a recording of himself singing, which he had managed to record before the performance. He feels broken. 6 months have passed. Paul is still working at the electronics store. He and Braddon got a raise. In a burst of joy, Paul began to sing. He couldn't believe he had his voice back. Paul was so happy that he didn't stop singing on the way home. As he called out to Jules, he did not notice the car coming towards him. Paul suffered numerous fractures. Another year and a half passed. Paul lies on the couch all day and watches the opera. He is in a deep depression. Jules tried to support him. When the doorbell rang, Paul was afraid it was the bailiffs again. Jules got tired of the whole thing and opened the door. It turned out to be just Braddon. He reported that he had been promoted at work to regional manager. That means Paul can take his place. The guy isn't sure he can handle it, but Braddon said that Jules can't work alone, plus they have credit. It turned out that Braden had made up with his girlfriend, and they were going on a vacation to the mountains. Paul agreed to be the manager of their store after all, because they need the money. Paul began his work duties. One evening Jules heard him singing in the shower. It makes her sad that Paul can't do what he dreams of doing. One day Paul and Jules met his parents at a cafe. He began to have a conflict with his father, who constantly rebuked him. Paul believes that the father has achieved nothing in life because he has never taken any risks. In the evening Paul saw an advertisement on the website for a music contest for non-professionals, which takes place in Britain. The winner would get £100,000. Since there was nothing to lose, Paul decided to send in the form. Jules thinks it was a great idea. From that day on Paul started rehearsing. He hadn't sung in almost 2 years, but he was going to make up for lost time. He rehearsed everywhere, at home, at work, in line at the supermarket, and even at the bus stop. Then one day he got a call from Jules telling he was accepted to the pageant. He has to be in Britain on Saturday. Despite the excitement, Paul wasn't going to back down. There are real professionals sitting on the jury. Soon it will be Paul's turn to take the stage. He is very scared, but his beloved wife and mother give him confidence. The jury judged the contestants very harshly, and this frightens Paul even more. His father, who is sitting at the bar with friends, sees the performance on TV, as does Braden and Hydrangea. The decisive moment had arrived. Paul took the stage. The audience and the jury were surprised when he said he was going to sing an opera. But as soon as Paul sang, everyone was mesmerized. Looking at his son on television, the father could not hold back tears. When Paul finished, the audience began to give him a standing ovation, and the woman from the jury even cried with admiration. It was very unexpected. The opinion of the jury was unanimous. Paul made it to the next round of the competition. Jules embraced her beloved husband. He would never have made it without her love and support. It was August 2007. Paul won the contest. He recorded his first album, went on a world tour, and received an invitation to sing in front of the Queen. Roland told his son for the first time in his life that he was proud of him. The mother came in and asked him to hurry, because the Queen of Great Britain herself is waiting for Paul. Before he went on stage, Paul kissed Jules, who was always there for him. He went out to the audience. Today is his moment of glory. Over the years, he and Jules traveled all over the world. Finally, Paul showed her Venice, where Pavarotti once failed to appreciate his talent. It was the opera of his life.